Now, the Bram Weinstein Show on Washington's new home for sports, ESPN 630.
Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. Sunday, everyone. Hi everyone.
Patting
What's
myself
up?
on the back again for getting that right,
Yeah.
by the way. I'm on a heater.
Yeah, schedule makers listen to you. 3 o'clock puck drop, 3
Knew
o'clock,
it.
midday.
Knew it.
3 o'clock puck drop. All right then. We'll get into the Capitals in a little bit because John Walton, voice of the Caps, going to join us, 3:25 today?
Yes.
Is that right, Callow?
Yep, 3:25.
Okay, so let's start with what just happened out here in Ashburn, which is where I am, the pre-draft press conference. We are thankfully 1 week away from ending this, and we can get our answers and move on with our lives, and they have a choice to make. And that choice will happen, at least at quarterback, at number 2. This is a very tight-lipped group. Adam Peters and Lance Newmark who's the new assistant GM, held the pre-draft press conference today. Obviously, they didn't tell anybody who they're going to pick. They didn't even suggest where they're leaning. They talked about the process more than anything and didn't give up much, which I wasn't surprised about, but there was a piece of news. They didn't say definitively no, but Adam Peters said in almost complete certain terms, this team will not trade out of number 2. So that's newsworthy here. Like, not that I expected them to, but we now know this. They're taking a quarterback at number 2. That is happening. So we can alleviate the idea of that they might try to move down because Minnesota overwhelms them or the Raiders overwhelm them or the Patriots try to. That's the only one, actually, is the caveat. If the Patriots tried to somehow move up to them, they move down to 3. I guess I would hear that out. But that's newsworthy. They're not going anywhere. They're staying at 2. It's going to be Jaden Daniels, Drake May, or J.J. McCarthy, and likely one of the first 2, in my opinion.
Yep. No, exactly. And that was as you said, the one piece of news coming from this, and Peter seemed pretty adamant that it was going to, take a lot for that to actually change. But he said comfortable, and I believe him at that.
Yes. Now, as for who it's going to be, obviously they're not going to tell us that. And he went on to say that we're real close to making our decision as to who it is, but we're not there yet.
Yep.
And he said there are, quote, a few things left they need to look at, including having a recap of the top 30 visit, which I'll get to in a minute because that became the firestorm of firestorms, and medicals, which, obviously we don't know what we don't know about, Jaden Daniels and Drake May. And they're going to need to go through that, before they sign off on really anything here. And then he finished that thought with basically saying, we're in no rush to make a decision. We have to do it in a week, but we don't have to do it today. But we're going to just take this one piece off the table. We're taking one of these guys. And so I don't know, relief is the right word for that, but I mean, and not that I expected him to say anything different, but I was a little surprised considering how tight-lipped they are that they just basically said we're settled in on taking the pick. Like, we're not going to move off of it. No one's going to be able to call us and give us a scenario by which we will move off of it. So we can end that at least minor speculation. I thought it was an unlikely outcome here, but like minor speculation that they would move off of it. They won't. And their decision isn't made, so they give themselves to next week to make that decision. And so we move on and we try to figure out which one it's going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think this one was more probably 2, if you're going to even call us, come correct 2. And if it's not going to be the hall of all halls, we're taking our guy. Like, that's seemingly what this was, the line drawn, essentially. And not who knows? They probably haven't gotten a call because everyone kind of knows they're going to take someone at number 2. But yeah, I mean,
I'm sure they've gotten calls up to this point.
Right.
Like, I'm sure that's the case. I mean, everyone knows they're taking a quarterback. The second they traded Sam Howell, obviously they were going to be taking a quarterback. And when you're sitting this high, I mean, my reaction after the season was, and even off of, I'm still kind of high on Sam Howell. Like, I like him, but you're not in this position very often. And hopefully this team, unless they get someone else's pick, is not back in this position again for a very long time. Like, it's the second time in 4 years they've had the second overall pick. Like, hopefully it's going to be a long time before we do this again, where we're picking this high. The opportunity is just too great. And as it turns out, it appears as if there are 3, 4, maybe 5 extremely high-level quarterbacks to choose from. We'll see how it plays out. The opportunity is too great to pass up. You just have to you can't overthink this. You just have to take the pick. The hard part is overthinking which one of the picks. And I think that's where we are now. Which one is it going to be? And then when I saw the news today that New England is talking about, well, they might trade out, well, that kind of signaled to me the guy that they want, they don't think is going to be on the board.
Right.
That's how that read to me.
Yeah.
Like that they said that. Now, all of that said, everyone seems to believe they want Jaden Daniels, right? That's what everyone seems to believe. So by them saying we're willing to shop the pick, and Peter saying today Washington isn't willing to move off of the pick, like then it leads to Jaden Daniels. And like that's where my leaning has been. That's where my guess has been. I would describe it as at this point 60-40 that it's the way it's going, because I don't think Drake May's off the board here. And then, all of the pundits keep kind of saying this, with the exception of Daniel Jeremiah, who said on his conference call that, and I trust his opinion on all of this, where he was like, he said what I've basically felt like. If it was up to me, I'd take Jaden Daniels, but I know Adam Peters and what they think and how they think about things, and that's why I think they'll take Drake May. And what happened with Adam Schefter today on another small podcast, I don't know why he's doing these tours, but he's going around all these different podcasts. On his own podcast and on TV, he said, I expect Washington to take Jaden Daniels. I'm not saying they're going to. I expect them to do it. Then he went on a podcast here locally and said the same thing and went so far as to say, go ahead and buy your jerseys, right? And then a day or two later, it got kind of like siphoned back for me through some people that he was kind of kidding, which I don't think he was. But that's like kind of the message he was trying to put out there, that he was kind of kidding about it, but I don't think he was, and he had said it too many times. Well, guess what happened today? Listen to this. This is Schefter again on, I think it's a Patriots podcast, talking about Jaden Daniels.
I expect Caleb Williams to go 1. Notice how I said that.
Yeah.
I think it's tracking for Jaden Daniels to be 2, but Washington's got all the quarterbacks in this week. We'll see what they decide. There's still 10 days. People change their minds. There's a lot that happen. Yeah. Again, if you're asking, I'm guessing. I want to be clear. I'm guessing that Jaden would be the second pick today. I don't know that, but that's my guess. And now the third pick, now we're into an interesting area. My guess would be that Drake May goes third. And the question is it New England? Is there a team that trades up to get that spot to go get Drake? We're going to see. And by the way, this is how I feel on Monday night at 9:25 Eastern as we take this. You can ask me Tuesday night, 9:25. I reserve the right to change my mind.
Okay. All right. So there he is hedging back against it again, because he doesn't actually know. This group has been extremely tight-lipped. There was a report from Albert Breer saying there are people in this building that don't know which direction they're going to go. Yeah. And then there was Peter saying today, we actually haven't made a final decision, which is, considering to the point we've gotten in the process, is interesting, mainly because I think it does speak to the quality of the candidates, that they are hedging because it's not obvious. And I think that's what this is about. It's not obvious. And they even, kind of reiterated today, it's a huge decision, and it's a tough decision, because the chances are May and Daniels are not going to both be great. And they want to get this right. And they know they're going to be judged by it. It's the first massive decision they're going to make collectively, and it's not clear or easy to make.
Sure. And I mean, I think what this fan base has settled in on as well with both of these guys is everyone has their one choice, but I think everyone's come around to, you got to support the guy, whoever it is. And I think this regime knows, though, full well, like, how does one compare to the other? I've said for a long time now that Jaden Daniels, I think he's going to be better, faster. Everyone keeps saying now that Drake May is going to be the little bit more of a project. That's why I've always said they're going to skew towards Daniels, because I think they want to get this thing out of the gate. They want to have a roaring start to this new era of the team, but you don't know who they're actually going to take. And I think that's what's weighing in on. That's why it's taking them, they're taking their time to make this decision, because they're going, can we take our time with May and will that be more beneficial than taking Daniels? And I think it's worth reiterating too. Peters and Quinn have both said they're not under any kind of timeline. Like that ownership hasn't said they need to be good right away or whatever. That there's not this pressure to be under the gun for it. But you and I both know that's there are some people going, well, by the time May might actually develop, we might be fired. That's not what they're saying here in Washington. That's what other people are saying about him. But I'm guessing that's the number one caveat between the two prospects right now.
Yes. Now, like I'm glad they're in this position. I'm glad these are the people making the decision. We'll see which way they go. I'm with you. I think we've all landed on, and this is I'm sitting at this point a week out. I'm 60-40. It's Daniels. I'm not convinced it's him. If it was my decision to make, without knowing either one of them, obviously, that's the way I'd go based off just watching them play. That's the way I'd go. Maybe they feel differently having gotten to spend some time with them. Who knows, right? Yeah. And then Lance Newmark, the first time that he spoke publicly was today. And I thought he said something really interesting about this whole process. Like, Peter spent the first 5 minutes of this thanking literally every person in the building about like how they got this thing together. And then Newmark, who was brought in, and he reiterated again, he goes, I've respected what this guy's done, but we've actually never worked together before. So this was an interesting process for us. And Newmark said something that I thought really stood out when he said, we had 70 days to get this right. Think about the gravity of the decision, how many picks they have in the top 100, 6 in the top 100, and that they actually have never worked together before. Yeah. And they were on a very shortened timeline going into the whole thing. And it really stood out hearing it going, this has been balls to the wall for all of these guys, and they're learning to work with each other. They're all new to one another. The lone exception would be Quinn and his defensive coordinator know each other. Like that, they're all new to one another. The staff, the front office has incorporated some people who have been here. Martin Mayhew is a carryover from previously in San Francisco, but still, they're all new together. The second, kind of chief decision maker, Lance Newmark, yes, they're close, but they never worked together before, and here they are landing at what is going to be a draft that might define what this team looks like for the next 5 years, because they have 6 picks in the top 100, and they're going to select a quarterback who they hope is going to be here for 5 to 10 years and be really good. Like, this is the epitome of pressure. Like, they have finally hit it, and not that they looked like they felt it or they were kind of showing it. But I think the way Peters kind of went about it was almost like saying, we have needed everybody to be part of something and to take it extraordinarily seriously and literally drop everything, because what we do next week over those 3 days is going to shape our legacies. And but it's true. Yeah. It's the reality of it.
No, of course. I mean, they have to get it right, or else we all kind of know what happens here. I mean, it's going to be like, we know how this can skew off. You either nail it, get it right, and everyone is together for the next 5 to 10 years, health being a factor, obviously, or things aren't good over the next 2 to 3 years. Quinn is bare minimum fired, or someone else comes in to try to fix whoever the quarterback is, and then they have to do another kick of the can 5 years from now, essentially. We all know that it's basically set in stone what has to happen over the next 5 years, or else everyone rolls again, pretty much.
Yes. Okay, so meantime, today's firestorm involves the decision the Commanders made to bring in a lot of players on their top 30 visits together. And then they had a group outing, and I didn't want to say I knew where it was going to be, but I caught myself and was like, I better not say this, because if I say it and then people show up to Top Golf, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. So I was like, you know what? I'll just say, I'll leave it with, you might find them out somewhere.
Did you like how I skewed you, asking if there was laser tag anywhere else in the area?
That's right. Yeah. I should have said, yes, it's laser tag. That would have gotten me. Anyway, so they did have this event, and then I guess because 4 of the quarterbacks were together, and that's really the unusual part of this, a lot of people debated, is this the way that you really want to hold these type of meetings. You have a short amount of time with each of these draftable candidates, and especially with the quarterbacks. And, any one of those four could be the selection, but I think we know it's really probably either Daniels or May. Don't you want to spend a lot of alone time with them and get to know them? And then, so this got, the pundits came out, and then I saw a clip from Florio and Chris Sims asking this question out loud.
I played it this morning.
Right.
Yeah.
Asking out loud, would you would you do this? And Jaden Daniels' agent liked a tweet questioning it and then put an emoji on top of that tweet. And so all of a sudden, now it's like he's kind of promoting the idea of, was this the best way to go about this? And when you're the agent of one of the quarterbacks and the likely quarterback who's going to be selected, why would you do that? And that opens the question of, did the agent show bad judgment by weighing in at this moment on that? Or was he trying to send a message on his own or on his client's behalf? And I guess unless he says something about it, we don't know.
Yeah. No. This is, I just can't believe, there are sports leagues in this country that we don't care about, yet here we are at the NFL breaking down how a team brings in possible prospects that they're going to draft. We are so deep in the weeds at this point. I don't think it matters. I'm just going to say it. I don't think it matters how this is done. Let's be real here, too, for the Commanders. They're going to pick one of three guys with that pick. And were they lumped in with a bunch of other guys? Yeah. Who cares? They already talked to these guys at the Combine. They talked to them at their pro day. What's another meeting the week before it happens? You're just seeing them in a different environment. The fact that they're questioning this, it just means it's the week before the draft and people don't have stuff to talk about. So they're trying to break down how a team brings in their prospects. You know what? I came to this conclusion this morning after hearing them kick it around. You know what's going to happen? Those guys, 10 years down the line, are going to see each other, whether some of them made it in the NFL or didn't make it in the NFL. They're going to go, oh, yeah, man, the last time I saw you, it was that Topgolf event. Oh, yeah, the Commanders hosted that. That's all it's going to come down to, and that's how it's going to be remembered. None of these guys are going to feel disrespected over this group outing. I bet you some of these guys, if not most of them, welcomed actually having a fun outing in an outlet instead of just
not sitting in rooms and talking about plays and being asked a lot of pointed questions about what kind of dude they are and all that type of stuff.
And having the 16th steak dinner in 30 days, I bet you for some of those guys, they're like, thank God I don't have to just sit in the same office or same type of room breaking film down like you just said. I don't know. I couldn't believe they had that much of a take over a team handling this, and it's just
I think
crazy.
It went that way because the agent
but still,
this is where I think the agent, this is bad judgment.
Yeah,
I don't think it really, however you feel about that, it's not in your best interest to question the motives of a team that might select your client number 2 overall.
That's right. And
it's just bad form. It's a bad idea. And so I don't know what he was thinking doing something like that and making, and then I saw Belichick on McAfee today, and Belichick said, we've done this before. We've had 12, 15 guys come in and hang out together. We did it on purpose. Peter said they did this in San Francisco a number of times where they had a bunch of guys in. The difference here was I think people got the flag went up because people saw the quarterbacks, and they for some reason treated that as being different, that the quarterbacks for some reason shouldn't have been lumped in together, that they should have been met with separately. I don't really what's the difference? I mean, I don't really understand that. And listen, there's another thing here that's going on, and I think Peters has said this a number of times, we want people to fit into our locker room. A lot of guys say this, but they keep saying it over and over. And if there's nothing I haven't learned about Dan Quinn at this point is he wants people in the room that he feels like that they're going to connect with and be part of the team chemistry. And Newmark, when asked about the decision to do this the other day, first Peter said he wanted to clarify. He goes, all of these guys got individual time. That's not what we didn't just go to Topgolf and send everybody home. He's like, we had individual time with everybody. We just decided to do this as well. And Newmark chimed in and he goes, it was good to see how magnetic some of the players were, which was okay, this is part of it. How do these guys interact with one another? And it's just a slice into their personalities. You just get to kind of see who are the guys that connect with other guys, even ones that they don't know, who are guys that are kind of having a good time and want to get along with everybody, who are the quieter players, who's competitive in a situation like Topgolf. Does it come out that way? I don't see anything wrong with this. And I think it was because the quarterbacks were involved that people got semi-offended. But I mean, to the agent, I would say back to you, is your quarterback going to be one of the guys, or is he such a diva that he can't hang out with other people?
Right, exactly.
And I bet, this is why you're doing a disservice for him by weighing into this, because I bet you Jaden Daniels, from what I've read about him, isn't some giant diva, which is why he's probably going to be selected here. But by you questioning the motives of a team, putting everybody together and taking them on a fun outing, as opposed to sticking them in a room and making them break down the Dallas offense all day long, well, what are you saying about your client? Your client doesn't want to take part in team events? What are you insinuating when you do something like that? So I'd like to think it was just bad judgment on the part of the agent, but I'll hear out, he's shooting up a red flag about his client didn't like this, whether he intended that or not.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let me take a quick break. We'll get back into all this stuff later. John Walton's going to join us next, voice of the Washington Capitals. The Caps are back in the playoffs, and they get set to start a series against the Rangers this weekend. Bram watch the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Great Bruno Mars from 2015, Uptown Funk. We chose 2015 for Throwback Thursday this week because that is the last time that the Washington Capitals faced the New York Rangers in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They lost that series in Game 7, 4-3. They blew a 3-1 series lead. Not to be a downer about what's going on here going into it, but we chose it because it's the last time that these two met one another, and they will start a series Sunday in Madison Square Garden as the Caps eked into the playoffs by beating the Flyers the other night 2-1 on an empty net goal that secured 8th place in the East, and they'll get the Eastern Conference winning Rangers starting Sunday as we welcome in the play-by-play voice of the Washington Capitals, John Walton. Hey, John, how are you? Thanks for coming on today.
I am good, Bram, and postseason hockey, what's not to be good about, right? Things are good, ready to go.
It is good. Let me just ask the overarching question, which was, just considering everything that happened this year, from the injuries, the sell-off, makeup of the team to start with, Ovi's start, all of it, did you expect them to end up in the playoffs this season?
Absolutely not. When you look back at especially maybe the first 20 games, but the first 5 games where they didn't score at all, they were averaging less than a goal and a half a game, and they barely got through a Calgary game in October at home, which was Spencer Carberry's first win. The power play at one point in the first half went 2 for 76. Goaltending was a little erratic with Darcy Kemper. There were injuries. I mean, there was a lot going on, and I think we all felt at the beginning of the season like this was going to be a difficult retooling on the fly. But as we all know, though, that makes it sound good, but in reality, that's difficult. You're transitioning to younger players, and you're fortifying the cupboard with draft picks, and there's a good chance you're going to set the deadline. They did, and character won out, and this group is among the most special I've ever been around. And John Carlson has not only reinvented himself, but I mean, he's become ended up being the minute leader in the International Hockey League this year in terms of average time on ice. He's 34. He came in so fired up after the Philadelphia game. He looked like he was 24. Alex Ovechkin's second half. The complete changing down the middle, which is unheard of. I mean, Backstrom and Kuznetsov were centers on this team on opening night, and both not at all a part of it now and haven't been for some time. So for all of those things to happen, and it just says wonderful things about this coaching staff and the character of this group, and Charlie Lindgren, to be able to get into this position and to do it the way they did was one of the most fun seasons I think I've ever had, because it was very unexpected, and they did it. And at this point, there's no reason to bet against them. I don't care if it's a President's Trophy winner on the other side. They get beat sometimes, and if you got a hot goalie, and the Capitals do, I think this is going to be a lot of fun starting Sunday.
Yeah. It's funny. I was telling Callow yesterday, like after the Flyers game, I got so many, texts from friends, and they were like jubilant. And here they are sneaking into the playoffs as an 8 seed. You wouldn't normally have that reaction, but I thought it was warranted because everything that they've done this year and the way that they fought through, especially the past couple of weeks, just to hang in there, it really was worth celebrating. I'm with you. This was one of the most rewarding, no matter what happens against the Rangers or whatever happens in the playoffs. It really was one of the most, I think, rewarding and hopefully, a season that they're going to build on in Carberry's first year, that this is what they're going to be made of.
I think that's exactly right. And in many senses, they're playing with house money. There is no expectation here. Nobody is going to say, oh, yeah, Washington's going to win this series. Maybe some people locally, not even locally, many probably. And that's okay because this is not, the team that, when you're going up against a President's Trophy winner and all the things the Rangers have done right. Bram, I don't hate this matchup at all. If they were going up against the Toronto Maple Leafs and given the history and given the speed and the way the Capitals didn't handle that, I would say, yeah, this is trouble. The Rangers are not, they have a lot of skill. They've got a lot of offense, and they have some guys that can motor a little bit. This, much like Tampa Bay, much like Boston, kind of in that realm. This is not an overwhelming speed team. This is a skill team, and they've got a good goalie back there, but he's young, and he's never really done a whole lot. They lost to the Devils in the first round last year. There is a lot of pressure on the Rangers. They play in New York, and the Capitals have none of those things. Now, listen, the Rangers might win in 5, but they might not. And if the Capitals go up there and come up with a win, the biggest thing for me, to your point in all of that, is, it was a great lead off to the Spencer Carberry era here, no matter what happens. But also no matter what happens the rest of the way, is that you have guys like Connor McMichael and Henrik Lapierre and Alexei Protas and Beck Malenstein and guys who, yeah, they won one level down last year in the spring, but this is their first taste of Stanley Cup playoff hockey. This is going to accelerate their learning curve. No matter what happens here, they say, oh, we got our doors blown up, but you know what? We know what we need to do next time. And that's where I'm really excited that they made it, is that you have that opportunity at the very least. And if you're able to win a game, like what if they win on Sunday? And what if Charlie Lindgren goes in and wins a 2-1 game? And now all of a sudden, everyone in that Rangers room is going to go, oh, my God, we lost home ice the first game, and look what happened. Just last year, Boston did this. Boston won 62 games last year, and they were out in the first round because Florida, who snuck in on the last day of the year, beat them in 7. And just like the Capitals in 2012, beat the defending champs in Boston that year. Things happen. Hockey's weird. It's the weirdest of all the major sports, and there is nothing that says that it can't happen. I'm not saying it will, but they're certainly going to. I think this has all the earmarks of going for a bit. I think the Caps are going to be, a little more in this thing than people think.
Yeah. So it's natural when a team starts selling off parts and has all these injuries that they just go through the motions. This one didn't. Can you point to anything that you witnessed or saw, a game, moments being around the team where you knew that they were not just going to kind of pack it in and get to the next season?
Yeah, Spencer Carberry gave one that was a good one, and I can probably come up with one a little bit later, but we were in Edmonton in early March and just got smoked. They scored 7 goals. Edmonton was just clearly the better team, fast. Caps don't handle that well. It turned into one of those lopsided losses. They either win tight or they lose big, and that's why their goal differential is what it is. But in the back half of 2-2, they came up and they beat Seattle, won a 2-1 game the next night, and just kind of willed that into existence when Seattle hadn't played the night before. And Spencer pointed to that game for character. I would say these last 3 games of the regular season, where when they went into Buffalo, and again, I know the Sabres didn't make the playoffs, but that was just a bad matchup for Washington. That's a fast team. Buffalo underachieved. They fired their coach since we were there, and that's the reason why. They're a better team than their record indicated. They should have, quite frankly, been a playoff team this year, and that's why sometimes coaches lose their jobs. But that game was bad, and there were only 3 left, and the feeling in the building and from Charlie on down, when you talked to them, it was just like, yeah, we feel like this might be the night that the playoff possibility slipped away. And you knew going home from Buffalo that night, you had to pretty much win the last 3 to give yourself a reasonable chance. And even then, you need a little help. They got it. Pittsburgh lost, and they took care of business. But You beat a Tampa Bay team that Andrei Vasilevsky, who might be the best goalie in the league right now, was in playoff form in that second period, making big saves, and it didn't shake them. They didn't care. It just kept going. And John Carlson found a game winner in the third period, beating, if not the best goalie in the league, certainly in the conversation. They beat Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay's a playoff team. And then they did it against Boston. Boston is the Atlantic Division. They were in line. They blew it, but they were going to be potentially, if they won, Atlantic Division champs. And they beat them, and they held them to 16 shots with a D-core that was generously underserved, with Dylan McElrath coming up from Hershey, and Vinny Iorio playing in less than 10 NHL games. I mean, they had no business with a roster with no Sandin and Jensen competing with a team that was that good. They beat them anyway. And Philadelphia, well, I gave them the best game, and Philly playing desperate, and they always play so tough. And they found a way to beat them in their building back-to-back when the Flyers hadn't played in 3 days. This team is oozing with character, and they're winning games they shouldn't be winning, and they're just doing it anyway. And they did it again, and now you say, all right, Charlie would be fired up and ready to go, as everyone would be, and now his brother's on the other side, and there's a sibling rivalry there that is huge. For those who are betting, folks, I wouldn't be taking I'm not saying the Rangers aren't going to win, but I would take a long look at what's gone on here in the recent past and say, listen, Washington's going to be in this thing. The Capitals are going to be there, and they're going to win a couple games. And if they do it in the right order and they do it early on, it's going to get interesting here.
You mentioned Carlson a few times. I mean, as of a couple of years ago, I looked at him and I'm like, he's never going to be the player that he was again. He looked shot to me, and I'm just staring down another long contract that they're just going to have to get through. But obviously things changed for him. So what happened with him this season?
You know, I think back to a year ago at Christmas time, and you're going into the holiday break, and he gets the skull fracture the same night that Alex Ovechkin passes Gordie Howe. He wasn't part of it. He was out that night. He was out till almost the end of the season, and it was long and a long time away. And I know it scared him, and there's a lot that he's still even maybe dealing with. That's an incredibly tough injury and a really tough comeback. And he did, but he only played about half the year last year. And I don't know, I mean, I haven't asked him this, but I feel like just watching him play, I think it made him appreciate what he has, the role that he is with his team. He is, I think, a Hall of Famer. I really do. He won the Cup. He has a great international record, a golden goal in World Juniors, and he's now over 1,000 games. And he's got a lot left in the tank. And to lead the league in time on ice, you have to be not only in very good shape, you have to be an incredibly smart hockey player to conserve energy when the moment strikes. You can't just go out and skate 30 minutes on a whim and then do it in back-to-back nights, no less, when your team's trying to get in the playoffs and needs both wins. I was so impressed with what he did this year. And I think missing part of last season, in my mind, probably had something to do with that, just an appreciation and a love for the game that was taken from him for a bit. And he's been so durable his whole career, and it was just an automatic. You were going to put number 74 on your lineup card, but didn't do that for a while last year. And I think getting back in and you know, he was more fired up than anybody. The Caps had the video of him coming into the room, and just no one was screaming loud at him. And I think it just shows that love for the game that's still there. And, you know, he knows what it's like to be a winner, and I'm sure he would like to do it again. And he knows he has more seasons behind him than he has in front of him. So I think he's going to lay it out and give it absolutely everything he has in this series.
How about Ovechkin? Now that we're here, how do you explain what was happening the first couple of months of the season and then what happened, which was normal Ovechkin for the last few months of the season?
I think it's sometimes a little harder to crank it up, certainly when you're 38. You know, this is not a natural thing for anybody. Most guys, I mean, Gretzky's numbers were down hugely by this point in his career, and was not nearly in the shape or putting up the numbers that Alex has been. A guy like Brett Hull was the same way. I mean, he got to 86 one year, and now it's, you know, by the time he gets to the end of his career, it's just a shell of that. So I think there was some thought that, okay, you know, he's trying to, you know, work back into it, and he didn't have a lot of puck luck there, a shooting percentage that was, you know, at 4%. I mean, it speaks to bad luck as much as anything else. And, you know, there was going to be some regression to the mean in a positive way, but I don't know that we would have foreseen that the guy who in the last Friday of January had 8 goals would end up with 31 by the time it was over. And it did feel very Ovechkin-like in the sense that he gets on a heater, and of course he's going to get there. He's not the same player. He's not crashing and banging. He doesn't have the energy that he did when he was in his 20s or maybe even 5 years ago. And he's not ever going to win a foot race against somebody getting back into the D zone. It's just the way it is. But I think that's a testament to him as a player, that he is still finding ways and still buying into, by the way, the new power play structure, which certainly worked well for him. And with a speedy center, mostly with Connor McMichael, a little bit with Henrik Lapierre, to be able to feed off of someone else's speed and get into right positions and make passes and make plays. I think he's had to change as a hockey player. And even though he's still got the big shot, he can't do it the way that he used to, but he's still finding ways to do it. And in the second half, to be able to do that, and he, much like Carlson, he may never get another chance in the postseason. You never know. And if you have that opportunity now, you want to make the most of it. And I'm certain that he will when the puck drops on Sunday.
Callow and I have landed on cockroaches or zombie caps. They seem to be the two best that we've got for this one because you can't kill them. Have you got any good nicknames for this group?
Oh, I don't know about nicknames. I know cardiac caps was taken a long time ago, but they're just, they keep talking about the power of friendship with this crew, and they're right. I mean, this is I put the power of sibling rivalry too potentially for this series, but they just like each other. This group, whether you're 38 or you're 22, everybody seems to fit in, and everybody is friends with everybody, and you've got a goalie who is truly the everyman who, when he's not doing this, guys, I was walking down the street in Nashville back in whenever we were in Nashville, sometime in the first half of the season, and I walked by a park bench. Keep in mind, Nashville is usually the place NHL players like to go. If they have a day off, they're going to blow off some steam. And I walked by Charlie Lindgren sitting on a park bench reading a book. And that's who he is. He wants to go fly fishing. I asked him what book he was reading. It was about fly fishing, actually. And he is happy to, he's not a big, go out and, rip it up kind of guy. He is cerebral. He is an everyman. I mean, when he goes back to Minnesota, he's going to be on a boat with a pole in his hand. And that's how I was kidding for a show that we did with him today on Monumental about, it's a shame we couldn't find you 2 days to go decompress in the Shenandoah and go fly fishing for a little bit. But he was happy to have the time off. He is so focused and calm, it's almost scary. And those are the qualities I like in a goaltender. I don't know about you, but I like seeing, who he is as a person. I'm just blown away by. I've never met anybody quite like him, and I mean that in the best possible way.
It's going to be fun. It's an easy team to root for right now, and obviously all the pressure in the world's on the other guys. So I'm excited for this weekend and for what this series and what this playoff run is. John, thanks so much for taking the time. Enjoy New York, and I'll talk to you when you get back.
That sounds great, Bram. Hopefully we have a long chance to do this again through springtime.
Sounds good. All right, that's John Walton, play-by-play voice of the Washington Capitals. We'll be right back. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Throwback Thursday is 2015. It's the last time the Washington Capitals and New York Rangers faced each other in a playoff series, and they will renew their rivalry starting Sunday, 3 o'clock. That's game one up in Madison Square Garden. The Rangers had the most points in the NHL this year, and the Capitals, as we've detailed for the last few weeks, crawled somehow their way into the playoffs and got a nice karmic break when John Tortorella pulled his goaltender when his team was already eliminated from the playoffs, and TJ Oshie took advantage, and the Caps won in regulation and got them to the playoffs starting this weekend. Little news on them, by the way. Tarek El-Bashir is reporting Nick Jensen, Rasmus Sandin, both sidelined over the in Sandin's case, last couple of weeks. And in Jensen's case, he got hurt in that Tampa Bay game when he got boarded. Both skated today during an optional practice. So there's progress. And so it's possible, they'll be back for game one. We'll see.
I mean, you know how this works in the hockey playoffs, man. You basically have to be missing a limb to miss any time. So we always hear about the crazy injuries once a run is done. So it's not going to shock me if one or both end up suiting up. This came out at the end of the show yesterday. Did you happen to see the Ryan Leonard stuff that popped out yesterday
yes.
too? Yeah.
Yes.
Ryan Leonard, for those that don't know, number one prospect, broke the points and goals record for a freshman at Boston College. Officially, they announced he will be returning to college. If he had not said that, he was eligible to be signed and be inserted into the lineup on Sunday.
Well, I don't think they would have done that.
Oh, no, they would have. It wouldn't have been the first time that would have happened. The Rangers, funny enough, did it with Chris Kreider years and years ago.
Throw somebody who hasn't played any professional hockey at all?
Yep. The Rangers did it with Chris Kreider the year they went to the Stanley Cup. They actually did the same exact thing. I forget where Kreider went to school. I think one of them, one of those Boston schools. But yeah, they did it, and he contributed, and he scored goals. And yes, it's a big jump. But look at the Caps lineup. You can't tell me he would have been inserted in the top 6 or the third line and actually probably contributed. Yes, there was a real possibility, and in fact, I believe the report came out. Either from Tarek or one of the other beat reporters, I can't remember which one, that the Caps did try to convince Leonard to sign, but that basically Leonard said, hey, I'm a freshman. I want to take another crack at this thing. They were in the college championship. That basically he said, I really want to, but I want to give college another crack, because what you do, it's like any other sport. The second you go pro, you can't go back. So he really wanted to go back to school for a year.
They lost in the NCAA championship. Is that correct?
Yeah, to Denver. By the way, it was Boston College is the most stacked team in the country, by the way. Like, had all of these records, wasn't shut out the entire season, was shut out in the title game. So, yeah, it was a heartbreaking loss for them as well. I kind of wonder, had they won the title, maybe he would have made the jump. But I think because they lost, he said, I want another crack at it. So, yeah.
All right. Okay. From the NBA, let's see. Sixers beat the Knicks last night by a point, so they move on. They'll face or they beat the Heat. Sorry, they're going to face the Knicks next. The Bing Bongs, boy, they got it going. Caps, Rangers, and Sixers, Knicks starting this weekend, both as the home teams in this. Oh boy! So the Bing Bongs are ready to roll this spring.
Yep.
I watched a good amount of the fourth quarter last night. Embiid made some unbelievable shots, clutch shots, but he's not moving very well. So he clearly is nowhere near 100%. That said, what do the Knicks have in the interior to guard him? Like, I don't know.
Right.
And the Brunson-Maxey matchup, or whatever that ends up being, I think that's going to be a heck of a matchup. I'm sure they're probably going to try to stick Lowry on Brunson a little bit. I don't know that he's got the requisite speed like he used to have to stay in front of him enough. So that's going to be an interesting matchup too. That's a heck of a first-round series of a 2-7 matchup. I mean, that's a really high-level 2-7 matchup. And, I mean, I think, like, the only reason why the 76ers are the 7 seed is because Embiid missed so much time. So that's the only reason why. So that screams like it could be an upset. Like that wouldn't be a surprise at all if they take New York out.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It's only because, like you said, Embiid was out. He's not 100% though. So I'm gonna guess the Knicks are gonna kind of try to go at him, try to wear him down early, because then the longer the series goes, the worse shape he's going to be in. That's going to be my guess there, is they're going to try to go at him a little bit and try to get it on the perimeter as well.
So let me paint a scenario for you for WFAN Friday morning. The Rangers lose 2 home games to the can't kill 'em Capitals, and the Knicks lose 2 home games to the 76ers, who got Embiid back. And the Giants didn't select a quarterback with their first-round pick in the NFL draft, in day 1 of the NFL draft. What is Friday WFAN going to be like?
Oh, man. It depends.
Mayhem.
It depends, though. If the Yankees are still on fire with Juan Soto, that does help quell the flames a little bit, because you know they love that team more than all the other ones. But you're right. There is the potential for the radio stations to go up in flames on Friday if that happens.
Total
yes,
flames.
I agree.
If the Rangers are down and the Knicks are down, and somehow they're down 0-2, and the Sixers winning that series to me would be no surprise at all. And then the Giants not finding Danny Dimes' replacement early in the draft. Oh, those phone callers are going to be amazing.
Yeah, no,
that's going to be amazing.
That's going to be one of those days too, where they get to do a sports talk radio show of like, what team is going to lose first out of these ones, or which team do you have the least amount of faith in to make it the comeback? It's going to be one of those days if it goes that way.
Who had the dumbest week, the Giants, the Knicks, or the Rangers?
Or the Jets, just to throw the Jets in there because they might have something stupid.
Yeah, well, the Islanders Islanders are playing too. Not that makes the FAN rounds, but they've got Carolina, so that's not going to go. That may not go well either.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened last night was the Bulls beat the Hawks. They'll face the Heat, but the Heat lost Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, they're done.
So
he's
out. So they're done.
Yeah.
Right, they're done.
Yeah.
And now without Jimmy Butler, it's almost like I'd prefer the Bulls to win that game, and because what the Celtics just got was a bye round.
Yeah.
Because the Heat without Butler can't beat them, and the Bulls can't beat them.
That's right.
So they got the East, that's as Seth Davis would say, Sharpie.
Yep.
The Celtics are going into the Eastern Conference semifinals probably in 5 games, no matter who is the opponent in the first round of the playoffs.
Jimmy, it's not only out for weeks. I mean, that was the initial diagnosis.
Yeah, out for weeks.
I mean, he's out for the whole first round. Yeah, they're absolutely finished for sure.
I mean, I'm assuming now Chicago's going to go beat them tomorrow night. And that's going to end their season anyway, is what I feel is going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let me take a quick break. I want to get into this Caitlin Clark thing because it's just ridiculous.
Yep.
We'll do this next. Bram Watch the Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. That's the weekend from 2015. We chose 2015 for Throwback Thursday because that is the last time. So it's been 9 years since the Caps and Rangers faced off against each other in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They will start their series this year, this weekend, Sunday, 3 p.m. puck drop up at Madison Square Garden. Rangers are the 1 seed. Caps are the 8 seed. The last time they did meet, it went to 7 games, and the Caps blew a 3-1 series lead. And I was looking at it yesterday with you, Callow, and it was mentioned in the piece when the Capitals blew the 3-1 series lead, and they were all 1-goal losses, and 2 of them were in overtime of the 3 losses that they had to end that series. That then dropped the Caps' all-time record to 6-5 in series where they had led 3 games to 1. Nearly 500 all-time in series they led 3 games to 1.
Yeah.
Rough.
Rough.
Rough's not even the word for that. And that is the heartbreak of being a fan of this team for years and years and years and years. That 3-1 was never safe. Ever.
That's Buckhands level. Impossible. That's what that is. In that series, by the way, it was one of those ones because it kind of falls through the cracks because there were so many heartbreaking series in the Ovechkin era. That one, though, they were literally 5 minutes away from winning it 3 different times. In 3 different games, they were ready to win that series, and they just didn't each time. And it was more and more brutal as the series went on because you kind of knew what was coming. And the miracle happened, and the Rangers end up winning. That was a very brutal series from front to back. I remember it pretty well.
I didn't even ask John Walton about the Peter Laviolette storyline this year now. Our ex-coach, in the year after he left, in his 8 millionth playoff series against our rookie coach who's in his first playoff series.
Yep.
And this team got to the playoffs, and Laviolette's last team didn't.
Right.
So, there's a heck of a storyline going on here for this weekend, too.
For sure. For sure. I thought it was, I made fun of this, too, because in those Caps-Rangers series, who was the head coach of the Rangers? Torts. And who was the coach of the Flyers for so long? Laviolette. Yeah. So they basically flipped positions and still had to go through the same teams to get there right now. So yeah, but as I said too, I said this to you yesterday or the day before, where you tell me what you remember about Laviolette here. I don't remember anything he said, and I work for the freaking team, and I don't remember really how much he said. And their play style was really forgettable, and it seemed like a lot of the players struggled playing underneath of them too. And you look at Carberry, and you look at what's happened, and all those questions you asked John about. John Carlson, the young players, Lindgren, Ovechkin, all of these guys have stepped up. I think the Caps made the right choice in their head coach because he's clearly flipped it around for not just the young guys, but for the older guys too. So yeah, there's definitely going to be that storyline heading into Sunday.
Yes, there is. So yesterday, Caitlin Clark is introduced at a press conference, her first as a member of the Indiana Fever off of the draft. And this happened in Indianapolis. She did the round. She went on McAfee. They did a really cool thing. They gave her a 22 Colts jersey. They're welcoming her to Indiana. And then this reporter, Greg Doyle, and if you are unfamiliar with him, is an all-time troll. Yep. His columns are he had a national column for a long time. And it was very, very sharp. I love Drew McGarry because there's some level of funny in when he goes after people. Doyle's were mean. I mean, but they were like, often well thought through and not really hot takey, but they were mean, and he would go after people.
Yep.
Anyway, he's in this press conference with Caitlin Clark, and he gets a question, and he basically asks her about when she makes the heart sign.
He made that sign to her.
He made the sign.
Yeah.
And she acknowledges, oh yeah, that's what I do to my family. And then he says, well, I like that you're here. And then she says, yeah, well, I do that to my family. And he goes, well, start doing that to me and we'll get along just fine. And of course, she didn't say anything to that. And then he said something else a little later to the coach of the team that was also awkward and uncomfortable. And he then, to his credit, he did apologize. He did own it. He did post things saying, I'm an oaf, and that was really bad, and I shouldn't have done that, and I made a mistake. And, fine. He apologized. But this guy's got a pretty, rough reputation in general for being pretty sharp with the athletes that he covers. And she's a unique person here. She is on a different stratosphere than other players in that league. The awareness of the league is going to change dramatically overnight. The Mystics already announced they're moving their game with them to Capital One Arena because the demand is so high for the tickets and this is where it's going to be, at least for this season. Everywhere she goes, she's elevated the game. She's reached a level of stardom, and she's going to get a lot of unusual attention because of it now. And I appreciate that he apologized, but I saw Clinton Yates, whose work I like a lot, and he posted the clip, and he said this about it.
Great rundown. Yeah.
It was a great rundown. He started with, this is obviously inappropriate, unprofessional, and just plain gross, but there's something else that's happening overall that he wants to discuss. And what he goes into when he talks about is, we've reached this point now where you're going to start talking about these athletes, and women's athletes are going to start getting kind of the men's treatment of being spoken to in a way that kind of was reserved mainly just for men. But because the WNBA and women's basketball is being elevated to the degree it is, they're going to run into situations like this differently. And the fact that they're women is something that we're all going to have to try to figure out, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think what Clinton was basically getting to was, there is an old guard of media people, and they're not used to women having the spotlight. And because they're not used to that, they think that it's just like any other day at the office, essentially. And especially, you know this, working in the sports world, the old guard doesn't play with the new guard or the new rules very well a lot of the times. Granted, tons of people are great people. I love our industry. But there are always stories about certain individuals, and I don't know Doyle or anything about him, but whatever. I'm going to guess he's part of the ones where you go, oh yeah, watch out for that guy. Where, he might say something off the cuff. I'm not accusing him of something vile, but I'm saying sometimes people still think they can talk a certain way or act a certain way, or in this case, in an open press conference, say that to arguably the most popular women's athlete, period, in the country right now. That's what Clinton is getting at as, do you think this is some kind of opportunity to, I don't know, do shtick? Absolutely not. You would never do that if LeBron James was on the podium there, is basically what I think Clinton was kind of getting at there. Get used to women having the same spotlight that you would give all these other massive athletes, or get out. There's no reason there's no reason for you to be covering it if you're not going to treat it seriously, I think is what
I found. Okay, so I found the tweets that he put out, and I thought it was really good. He goes, I'm extremely curious to see how the generalized culture around this country changes, because we're in a space beyond hoops that we haven't seen, which is just that a U.S. professional women's league could have markedly dominant cultural market share. None of us have ever really lived in a space where, for the WNBA, which is necessarily the specific point here, has undeniable space and just regular everyday life that changes the priority of the male gaze entirely. There are many men who are simply not ready for that. Don't get me wrong, this growth is awesome, but I can tell you from life experience, never mind as a sports journalist, that there's still very much a patina of that's nice for the ladies to all of it. And we're far closer to these women control the zeitgeist period than we know. And that just changes so many things, specifically on a professional level, that a lot of markets are going to have to find a way to properly adjust for and maximize in terms of just what are we actually doing here, because this isn't going backwards. Like, the bottom line here is that a cultural shift in sports journalism has yet to be invested in enough to change the way the average person consumes things on the ground more deeply. Short version, dudes aren't really ready to just not matter in this space. Those TV numbers are plain impossible to ignore in terms of the amount of people who care at all. Never mind, will continue to care more. How we take care of the people who have invested their lives in this beyond just whether or not some old guy is having fun will be fascinating. Last thing I'll say about it is what exactly besides obvious misogyny is the actual purpose of publicly staking a claim that you don't enjoy women's sports? Like, what is the point of just openly declaring such haterade? What does anyone get out of that? I'll never understand it.
Yep.
I think he's right. Like, on the last part of I just don't like women's sports, whatever. Like, it's an old, like, trope that I don't care about anymore, and I just think is a lazy, it means you don't watch it. So, like,
you're shooting yourself.
That's
what I say to people all the time.
Whatever. Like, you're just being lazy.
Right.
Like, if that's what it is. But on the larger point of, look, like, you're going to need to come to terms with the idea that they are extremely popular now. As popular as the men's game is, like, more so. The ratings for their games were higher when Caitlin Clark was involved, were higher than the games in the men's games that aired the day before. She is a more well-known basketball player at Iowa than almost any of the men's players were this year in the NCAA tournament. She walks into the WNBA as a superstar who all of a sudden was on Weekend Update, is profiled on NPR, profiled on all the news stations. The ratings don't lie. And even Dawn Staley, I saw an interview with her the other day, go, look, like, the reason why our sport elevated to the degree it did this past year was her. And, like, I don't think anybody can really explain why, but, like, it did. And she is a game-changing personality that's coming through the sport, whether you like it or not. And he's right. The people who cover these things are going to have to come around to, this is bigger than some niche product that you could get away with acting like an idiot at, which is what this guy did yesterday. And, you know, I agree there is a larger, like, I think most people don't act this way in any press conference, just in general. But I agree to the point of everyone's going to have to come around to, this isn't going backwards. And you're going to have to start treating them differently. There's another side of that, which is, I think, what we've seen a little bit. You know, you're going to start to get the more intense coverage that goes with that. You're going to start to get, like, women's basketball hit the peak for me in watching the NCAA tournament and then seeing the reactions to Kim Mulkey or her players or the way that the guys typically get treated in that space en masse because they failed in that game. And when you fail in this game, the trolls come out en masse.
Sure.
So there's two sides to all of this. Like, there's a tremendous amount of attention that's going to change how they're treated in general. But I also agree with this larger sentiment of journalism and journalists are going to have to do better and come to terms with this is here and it's not going backwards again.
No, 100%. And I think what happened here, too, just to, like, try to pin down why it blew up this year is, one, women's sports have been on the rise, period, for the last 5 to 10 years, essentially. Right?
As Ted, he invented them.
and so I think what happened, though, is if you watch, and I'm more referencing basketball and soccer here. Those are the two that I intake the most. But they are mostly back to basics, that if you appreciate football, or not football, soccer or basketball, that this is what they do best, is they know how to do the basics better than anyone else, just as much as the NBA. But what happened with Caitlin Clark was all of a sudden it was an accelerant where she's shooting the ball like Steph Curry and passing the ball like Steve Nash. And, like, to the point where people are irked that we have to make those comparisons, that we're comparing a woman to those two, but we're comparing them to arguably the best shooter ever in the game to one of the best passers ever in the game. And the fact that she's doing both, you can't look away from it. And so this is like, I was kind of waiting for this moment for not only, I think soccer has had its moment, especially because the U.S. women are so much better than a lot of other countries. And granted, they didn't win the World Cup and they didn't have a great run this past, but they were so much better for so much longer. You couldn't turn away from them, right? I think the same thing happened with hoops now, where you had Caitlin Clark basically being so effing good. If you weren't paying attention, you were cheating yourself of a great sports watching appearance or sports watching experience is what I meant to say. And if you weren't watching it, then that's on you. That's not on anyone else. And I think that's what Clinton's getting at there too, is if you're saying you don't like this, you're just outing yourself as somebody that's actually not a real big sports fan. And that's on you, not on anyone else.
I agree. Like, everybody was watching it. Everybody. And the
it was
numbers
good.
bear it
It's
out.
not like it was like no one was placating to like, let's watch women's sports.
No.
Let's give them a chance, guys. No, it was genuinely fun to watch. Like, that's what I think is the ridiculous part about all of this. We're not trying to just like force it. It was good, great, viewing experience.
I do like also the backlash to Greg Doyle's thing was so ridiculous yesterday. I mean, it was just like, I wouldn't talk to any athlete like that. It was just so utterly, unless it was like a planned bit, like I wouldn't do that. Like, it's so utterly ridiculous. And I heard the show before us basically talking about, like, you don't go to a press conference and make it about you, which is what he did. And you never, ever, ever do that. Like, I'm the voice of the Commanders. I would never make a single thing about me, ever in their press conferences, on the air, during their games, ever would I make it about me. Like, if you don't know that, you're lost in this. But I think it's almost like he felt empowered because it's almost like he acted like, well, I'm still bigger than you here. And it's kind of like, because when he said, if you do that to me, we'll be fine, he's kind of like almost doing a domineering type presence over her, saying, I'm one of the voices in this town that everybody listens to. So it'd be in your best interest, girly, to be on my good side. And I'm sitting there going, I think this is why some of the reaction was, one, it was just so ridiculous to act that way. But two, it was kind of like, dude, I don't think you recognize how big a star she is, how big a deal this is, what a transformative moment this is, and it ain't about you. And actually, it's you and your type that are going to get run over by the momentum of all of this, which is why I think it struck a chord with everybody the way that it did yesterday, because it was so obtuse to act that way to her.
And I think, to Clinton's point, too, is like, this is now a cultural movement, not a sports movement either.
Yes,
that, like,
100%.
This is why I was glad to see the outrage was swift and fast with this one, too, because it was like, there's so many bad layers to it, but everyone basically was in agreement. You can't do that. Like, there's no appropriate place to ever talk to her the way that you did. And not only that, I don't know how old he is, but he's older, and you're talking to this woman in her 20s, and you think you have the right to talk to her like that? Like, no,
it's
absolutely
absurd.
not. Absolutely
well,
not.
And I'm like, I'm sitting there, I'm listening to this, and I'm going, like, God, you are from another era, dude. Like, you think you can go up and talk to some woman that way? Like, what are you, out of your mind? Like, you can't talk to any woman that way. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, this is the mouth breather at the bar. It's like, hey, babe, how's it going? Like, go get. It's just like ridiculous. Just utterly ridiculous. All right, there's one other story locally that this is huge. This is from ESPN. Schools in Virginia will be able to directly pay athletes via name, image, and likeness in deals thanks to a state law that was signed on Thursday morning, making another significant step in the professionalization of college sports. The new law will take effect July 1st. It'll be the first in any state, making it illegal for the NCAA to punish a school for compensating athletes for name, image, and likeness. Current NCAA rules prohibit schools from signing NIL deals with their own players. The law could either give Virginia schools a significant recruiting advantage or provide a catalyst for similar changes elsewhere. Here's the quote. If this law gets us closer to a federal or national solution for college athletics, and it'll be more than worthwhile. That's from Carla Williams, who is the AD at the University of Virginia. Until then, we have an obligation to ensure we maintain an elite athletic programs at UVA. Administrators from Virginia took a leading role in crafting the legislation with help from colleagues at Virginia Tech, according to its author, the Commonwealth delegate Terry Austin. Both Williams and Virginia Tech AD Whit Babcock declined to share details about how they're planning to use the new opportunities presented by the law. So I've been talking about this for a while. And UVA is one of them that falls into this category. So they're in a Power 5 school, but they don't have the collectives or the media market or the history or the boosters that we know of that would be able to literally compete with the Clemsons, Florida States, Alabamas, Ohio State, Michigans of the world. So the only way around this is to let the schools pay for the players. That's their only way. And so they're the first to go. The only chance we're going to have competitive teams in the big sports is we got to pay the players. And they got the governor to sign onto a bill to this. They got the legislature to vote on this. And this will be the first of many. In fact, this law, I think, will become across the board around the country within the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So we are going to have players being paid. Get used to it. It's happening.
Yeah, of course. And I think this is kind of probably what, these Virginia schools were waiting for, too. I mean, we knew that there had to be a better structure to all of this. Here's your first step to having said structure, essentially.
Yeah, there was I think in their case, because they're local and because I know, what's going on, I'm watching Tony Bennett, and they're getting roasted for the way that he plays, right? And I'm sitting there going, you guys don't have a bad coach. There's no bad coach here. What you don't have is the ability to compete for the players because you don't have the funds to do so. And the portal is definitively a difficult place for a place like Virginia to be. The only answer for them to remain competitive in the here and now, unless things change from a booster perspective, is they've got to legalize paying for their players.
Right.
And they've done so today. And they won't be the first. They won't be the last. And I'll tell you what, if I'm the state of Maryland, I'm going to Westmore tomorrow and going, we need to do this too.
Yep.
Tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Get ahead of it. Get ahead of it. All right, we'll take a quick break. Bram, what's the show? ESPN 630 Sports Capital.